And Bob, I'm going to let you take it away. Or actually, Pat. I'm Pat. Pat's here.
There,
No,
yeah.
Pat's here somewhere. I don't see you, Pat.
Well, I'm currently in Idaho, so.
Oh, we were just talking about. Well, I'm going to let you take it away then.
Okay, we'll call to order. This is the Somis Municipal Advisory Council meeting of Wednesday, July 14th at 6:00 p.m. So we're officially open.
Great.
Okay, next item on the agenda is flag salute. Bob, will you host the honors for us? Lead us in a pledge.
Sure. Hey, look at that flag now. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's liberty and justice for all.
I hear the train in the background.
Oh, that's in Somis. It's going through.
Yeah. All right, next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from the meeting of May 12th. And has everybody had a chance to review those minutes?
I move we approve the minutes.
I have one correction.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Under item number 5, it talks about, excuse me, let's see, where is it?
Public safety reports.
No, talks about Hagel lumber and the
Number
sign.
6. Item 6.
Yeah, it's item 6. No, it's item 5. He's talking about, maybe it was 6. I thought it was 5. Basically just a typo. It refers to Hagel / Prime Time changing their signs, but it's actually Hagel lumber and Prime Time changing their signs.
Okay, I'll make that correction.
Okay, with that, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, Denise, you want to do a roll call?
Sure will. Pat Richards,
Aye.
Bob Fulkerson,
Aye.
Jack Foss.
Aye.
Patty,
Aye.
I'm looking for you. One
I'm
second.
here.
Oh, there you are. Oh, Patty.
Hi.
Hi, Patty. Martinez.
Hi. Yes.
Hi. Okay. Your eye sounded like a hi. Okay.
Okay, next item on our agenda is agenda review. Any interest to change or amend the agenda? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the agenda as written.
All right.
Okay, item number 5 on our agenda is public safety reports. Denise, do we have a representative from Sheriff's Department or CHP?
I have Lieutenant Key from CHP.
Do we have him online?
I do.
So
Good evening.
it's all yours, Lieutenant.
All right, sir. Thank you. Since our last meeting on May 12th, there was only 4 collisions in the Somis area. 3 of them were related to speed. 1 of them was an unsafe turning movement, and they were all relatively minor. There was a 5-car collision right there in Somis, right near North Street. But, fortunately, there was no significant injuries. So again, it seems like most of the time it's related to speed and folks not stopping in time to with the existing traffic conditions. So just driving too fast. We had a new commander appointed to the Conejo Scales, and her name is Heather Hoagland. So I plan to have her attend one of our meetings in the near future, just so she can introduce herself to everybody. And that way you can have any commercial issues addressed through her. So she's a really good person, and I think she's going to work out well. And she wants to be a part of the meetings and the community. So we'll be introducing her soon to the MAC. And other than that, I really have no other issues or anything to bring forward. And I open it up to everybody else if they have any traffic related matters they would like us to address in the area.
Lieutenant is the new CHP officer is she responsible for both the Caneo grade and some of the temporary on 118?
Yes, sir, she will be.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Do
Wasn't
we know
there a
what
crash
caused
up
the
on-
power outage this morning?
Jim?
I'm sorry. I'm
Sorry.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Who? Power outage? Somebody said something about power outage.
Yeah, there was a power outage.
There
in
was a
Somis.
rumor that somebody took out a power pole.
I haven't been updated on any issue with, there could have been. I've been in meetings all day today and I wasn't able to talk to anybody about what occurred today, but I wasn't aware of any kind of collision that caused a power outage.
How about the collision on 4th of July weekend that somebody took out the power lines on Stockton and there was a power outage?
Yeah, at dinner time.
Uh-huh.
But I don't have anything else. Are there any complaints to address in the area?
How about the speed on Balcom Canyon?
Yeah, we've definitely, we've sent officers over there and addressed previous complaints, but I'll make sure to let our folks know to make passes through there. I actually got through right before this meeting. I talked to one of the graveyard officers and trying to figure out and make sure that they're driving in the area. And he said that they do on nearly every night. But he said, unfortunately, there's usually no one around. Everybody's asleep at the time that they pass through, so you wouldn't see them. But they assured me that they do make passes and check the area. But I'll address the request for officers, obviously during the day. It's definitely we can get people over there and we'll make sure that they're enforcing traffic.
That'd be great because
Thank you.
yeah, most
Thank you,
kind
Lieutenant.
of prime people going to work, people coming
Okay.
back from work.
Okay.
Definitely.
Lieutenant,
I
this
have a-
Pat, this Pat Richards again. I think the last meeting you were talking about coffee with a cop or something that you were trying to institute.
Yes.
Is that still ongoing?
Yes, we actually, we planned one so far, and I told our public affairs officer that I want to do one in Somis, and he's aware of it. We're going to be planning that in the near future. And as soon as I get more information, I'll let you know so that you can attend if you would like.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question on the split of, well, it kind of continues from Somis Road. Is Balcom Canyon in Moore Park and Bradley Road in Ventura District?
I know Balcom is, and Bradley might be the Ventura area. It's kind of weird how that works out there. Two different offices taking that area, but yes.
Kind of why I asked.
Yeah, it's I didn't design it. They did it before I got to the office. So yeah, that's the way it works.
Okay.
All right.
I have no other questions. Thank you very much, Lieutenant.
Anytime, you take care.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Pat, I'm not sure if I have sheriff's office. I know our usual person who does come is on leave right now. So unless someone is, I'm not recognizing the number because sometimes they'll call in. But no, I don't think so.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll go ahead and move on with the agenda. Next item on the agenda is comments from County Supervisor
sorry.
Linda Parks.
Let me unmute you.
Uh-oh.
There we go.
Good. Good evening, everybody. I'm looking forward to getting back into actually seeing you all in person. The Board of Supervisors is going to be having their meetings in person, I think, starting after the summer break, which would be in September. So look forward to us being together then too. As far as follow up on issues, we know that the county is looking at getting a grant for safe routes to schools. And I know a lot of that has to do with trying to get some sidewalks on both West Street So we're looking at that and hoping that they will get them. It requires both federal and state funding, but we'll keep you apprised to that. You also know about the Transportation Commission doing their freight corridor workshop, which I think is really important to stay on top of. And I know that they are going to be extending their time for public review. I think they got more comments probably than they were anticipating. So that's good that they're getting a lot of input. And people can actually still go. And the issue here is the potential of Lewis Road being considered part of a freight corridor. And then, you know, that would be very detrimental because it would have to be widened. And at the same time, the city of Camarillo, from some of the council members I've talked with, are not opposed necessarily to having a Lewis. So it's something for us to be careful of for the community of Somis. And you can go and attend their meetings, but also look at what they've got on a line right now. The website for the Transportation Commission is goventura.org. And then it's /BC Freight. This is a freight corridor study. So I want to keep you guys in the loop on that, and we'll have them back to your MAC before they move forward once they compile their information. As far as the farm worker housing update that I know you want to keep on your agenda, we had Joe Pope with our Waterworks department speaking to you at our last meeting, and he says nothing new has happened to report regarding that. From a water supply perspective, he gave us some good information about sewer issues, and I know I mentioned that at our supervisors meeting of the potential of having VRSD, who was the intended operator of the farm worker housing package. They apparently are not going to do that. And I just don't want the county to be doing that either. I think the best is to hook up to the city of Camarillo since it's right adjacent to the city. And so I'll be looking at continuing that effort of seeing if we can't get the city to hook up. And the county is now telling me a little bit, I think, more hopeful that it wouldn't require a vote of the people, which is the information I had been giving because of SOAR, that it would require a vote of the people, but there is an exemption for low cost housing, so you wouldn't have to in order to hook up. So that we'll keep on your agenda. If things change, we'll make sure that you know about it.
Linda, this is Pat Richards again. I've read the conditions and I don't see any language that requires the project to be available for low and very low income households. How is the project going to be portrayed as an affordable project or a low income if there isn't a specific condition that obligates them to perform that?
I'll get back to you, but it is 100% intended only for farm workers, only for affordable, and requiring the, as you know, the management company to verify that only low income, well, only farm workers are there. And it's pretty much presumed that a farm worker is a very low income. But I can get you more information on that. If you think that it isn't required to be for low income farm workers, I'll go ahead and ask our county planning department, county council to get us that requirement, you know, to make sure that that is a requirement.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so also I wanted to let you know that I'm putting together a town hall on fire safety. It's out in Oak Park, which is a distance for you to get to. It's going to be a really good presentation. We're starting with the fire chief. Chief Mark Lorenzen will be speaking about the requirements that the fire department, you know, brush clearance certainly, and new state law regarding brush clearance. I think it's now going to allow for the option, if desired, to actually increase the 100-foot clearance, but also just talk about the response that they do and the need for what you can do at your home to make it safer. And not only the fire chief, we also have the director of the Office of Emergency Services at the county, as well as Lieutenant Key. We'll talk about the concept of evacuations and what their roles are and the nice technology they have to be able to make sure that they can do through VC alert, which is kind of they call you. You know, it's a reverse 911 is how I think of that. We're also going to have ways that the community can get involved, either through a fire safe council. So the head of the Ventura County Fire Safe Council folks coming, as well as a major leader in the CRET CERT, which is Community Emergency, who will also be talking about how the community can join a team to help not only their own selves, but also their neighbors. And I think one of the most interesting parts, because I've heard the, the presentation a few times, but we have a gentleman coming up from San Diego who is an expert on environmental aspects of brush clearance. So how you can become more fire safe, but do it in a way that doesn't have a severe impact to the environment. And he's with the Chaparral Institute. So I'm looking forward to hearing his presentation. There's also some grants that our county has to help make your homes energy for energy conservation, significant grant funds through an organization. It's a 3-county wide organization, so we call it 3C for 3-county REN, and that's for Regional Energy Alliance that we have. So bringing this to to be having a fire resiliency seminar, and you can also learn about that at their website, which is www.3c-ren.org. So good information out there. I just really want people to be alert and do what we can to prevent fires. And so if we do have a fire, to absolutely have a plan and then know how you can best protect your home. So getting that information out early, I think is good news. Our fire department works well with our sheriff's department. We've got some new helicopters that are going to be really helpful in the effort too. I'm really glad to see. With that, I think that I did want to mention there's also something else that I'm going to be pushing for strongly for the Somis community. And that is we are redistricting now, looking at congressional districts, state redistricting, all that's happening. It comes to the Board of Supervisors in the fall. And as you know, Somis is split down the middle, and it should not be. You know, the idea that you have, for example, the CHP, if it's on the one CHP, if it's on one side of Somis Road, a different CHP office on the other side, that's because you're in 2 different state jurisdictions, legislative jurisdictions. You have a different senator, different assembly member, depending on which side of the road is. So I'm going to be working, and I think maybe that would be an appropriate thing to put on your next MAC agenda, to write a letter to the redistricting commission requesting that the town of Somis not be split down the middle and instead be one cohesive community, which is what you are. And that's really what they're supposed to do as part of their job. It certainly doesn't make that much difference because you're such a small community, you know, in their overall, you know, chess game or whatever, where they're trying to figure out the districts. But I think it's really important that you guys become united. So that's something I'll be working for. And I'm open for questions.
Linda, this is Pat Richards. Is that redistricting committee a state organization?
Yes.
And who assigns the delegates to that committee? Or
you get appointed to it. I think you apply, and I think it's already kind of up and going. It's, we have some folks from our CEO's office who might know more about that, but I'm starting to see a lot of effort. The state legislature is a little concerned with the potential of, for example, where I live, of splitting Thousand Oaks in half and having half be with the San Fernando Valley. So all those kind of things come into play. But I think in all of this, you know, Somis should be something we should be able to take care of if you have some good leadership there.
all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in the past, We were one time split into 3 sections.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was kind of good that we had 3 supervisors that had to be good on their toes, and you kind of, knew how all 3 of them kind of felt about a certain issue. And having 2 supervisors on their toes now, I don't think it's a bad idea to be split. Or a good,
depends
either
on
way,
Yeah, there's a
everybody
lot
has to be informed rather than just going by what the local supervisor says, if you know what I mean.
Well, we've had the issue, for example, in Oxnard at one time, they wanted me to like have Hollywood Beach in that area. The Oxnard very upset with the whole concept that they would split their city up. It makes it really difficult to have different jurisdictions you have to go to, and you don't have one represented. But it's up to you if you do want it on your agenda to ask that it be that you write a letter requesting that they consider you as one instead of multiple. It's up to you.
Yeah, it's just interesting point from the past.
Any other question?
Sparks, Kirby Thomas here. Yes, Kirby Thomas here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Kirby.
Hello? This is Kirby.
Hello.
Okay, good. I'm glad because I don't have any internet out here still. And are we dead in the water? Is the project way over? Is it dead?
Well,
Kirby, on our agenda today, we're going to have a presentation about broadband. So let's save that one for we get to the agenda item, which is coming up on my heels, I think, after me. So is that good?
right.
Fair enough.
Right, thank you. I'm gonna ask,
Is there another question, Denise?
no, I was just getting Mr. Theobald ready.
Okay.
I'm having a meeting right now.
Okay,
Bob,
next
is that
item.
you?
I'm on a Zoom meeting right now.
Oh, okay.
Denise,
I'll
this
unmute him in a minute.
is Pat Richards again. Sorry you're not getting video.
That's okay.
Next item on our agenda is an informational item regarding the presentation of the status of the broadband for the Somis area. So, and do we have a representative or speaker
Yes, we do.
and who
And
that might be?
I have Mr. Terry Theobald, Director of the IT Services. I have Mike Pettit, Assistant CEO, and I have, Chrissy Ortega. She's also with the CEO's office. I'll ask you to unmute. Okay.
Denise, you can see my screen.
Yes.
All right. Mike Pettit, would you like to make any opening comments before I begin?
No, please take it away, Terry.
All right. Well, good evening, Somis Municipal Advisory Council, other members of the Somis community and other participants on the call. My name is Terry Theobald. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the County of Ventura. My office and the CEO's office were both contacted by Supervisor Park's office to provide an update on broadband. I'm going to be presenting an update on the county's broadband project, which is one I'm working or actually taking leadership on. And then Chrissy will give you an update on the feasibility study that the CEO's office is working on. And because they're so tightly related, I'm going to recommend that we hold all questions until we get to the end. And that way you've seen both sides of the presentation. You have all the information. So with that, I'll go ahead and get going. So I thought I would start off with the county project vision. Now, some of this has been presented a couple of times in the county's Board of Supervisors meeting, but I think it's important to recap some key points of those presentations. First and foremost, our objectives as we originally defined for the project in 2019, and actually this goes back to, some of these go back to as early as 2014, was closing the digital divide to the underserved and the disadvantaged communities. So the difference is disadvantaged would be those that may not have the financial resources, are sort of perhaps not able to get internet at the price they want. Underserved would be those that don't necessarily meet the definition of disadvantaged, but the service providers don't have a good business case to provide service to those areas. Economic development, we've got a economic development vitality plan that the county worked on and published, and in there describes how broadband will help with that. Reduce consumer costs for internet access. Of course, the county sees a lot of benefit in interconnection between our various facilities, not just county facilities, but other government facilities, fire stations, police stations, cities, et cetera. And then providing more communication redundancy and resiliency. We've had a number of wildfires go through, and some of those have hampered to some degree our communication regarding our radio towers, our microwave, and this project we're going to talk about helps improve our redundancy and resiliency. The approach that we've described is to build multiple redundant fiber backbone paths throughout the county. I highlight redundant because a lot of the internet service providers that do provide internet into a community only have one pathway, their pathway. In the case of the county, we have both Spectrum and AT&T connections, and we can take advantage of whichever one we need to based on what's happening at any particular moment in time. Recently, there was a significant Spectrum outage that affected the county, and we were able to switch over to AT&T so that we could continue to do business. So the pathways that we're building, all of the pathways that we're building will have redundant capabilities, meaning that we can get to the internet through more than one of these. There are actually 3 pathways that have been envisioned, that have been presented, and 2 that are of particular interest to this group are the one that comes down the 118. The one that comes down the 118 from the Moore Park area will go to Ventura, and it will connect to the internet through Thousand Oaks and out through Agoura Hills Westlake. And we are also considering a pathway that connects us through Moore Park through Simi Valley. So we have 2 ways to get the internet for the 118. And just to make sure, we also have a pathway coming down the 126 from Santa Clarita that's going to Ventura. And that one will also have some interconnects, call them side streets, that will connect the 126 and the 118 across the 23, the Grimes Canyon area, and also Wells Road, Los Angeles Avenue 118 down in the Saticoy area. And that one will also have a connection to the internet through Santa Clarita. So this provides us a lot of that resiliency and redundancy I've talked about. The third path that we focused on, probably not of much interest here, is the one that goes up through Ojai and down to Ventura. And those 3 pathways provide a lot of coverage for the county. And so we have projects that have been designed that are dig ready. Dig ready means that we have laid them out. We've identified the paths, we've identified the construction methods, and we've gotten estimates on how we will go about this. So because they're dig ready, what we're really waiting for on these is funding, and I'll be talking about funding in the next slide. Once we have the fiber backbone paths in place, then we're going to be focusing on connecting individual residents and businesses to the backbone. And that's something that is on several orders of magnitude larger than just getting the backbones in place. So the backbone basically gives you internet connectivity to the doorway of the neighborhood or the area, and then the last miles of that connectivity to the residents and businesses will be built next. And we're really going to be relying on the service providers to provide that final mile connection to those residences and businesses, as opposed to being part of the backbone project that I'm talking about. Funding has been a big topic. Funding has been a big topic in the news these days. We're part of the Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG, and they've developed a digital divide group to go get some of the funding we've been talking about. They've developed a resolution for counties to adopt, which the County of Ventura has adopted. We're working on simplified permitting for broadband related construction, which allows us to have consistent permitting across all jurisdictions. This group is coordinating a request, or has actually coordinated the request, for a total of over $8 billion. That'd be $4 billion in federal money, and then looking to have the state match another $4 billion for a total of $8 billion to provide internet connectivity to every dwelling in the 7 Southern California counties. Based upon, and this is just me, I like to know how much of that I'm going to get, or the county is going to get. And so I did a quick calculation based on their calculations, and I determined that it looks like somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 million of that would be allocated to Ventura County, all of Ventura County, all of the cities, the counties, rural areas. That includes the the broadband pathways I'm talking about, and it also includes all of the last connections to the residents and businesses. We're currently also developing a method for subsidized access for low-income disadvantaged communities to support getting widespread broadband adoption and access. This is going to require strong public governance to oversee the RFPs, the requests for proposals that will go out, because these will be public-private partnerships where the private part of the equation is required for the construction and the service that will be provided, and the public side is to provide a portion of the fundings and also some of the governance oversight over those projects to make sure we actually meet the goal of closing the digital divide. And then, of course, part of that is making sure the project funds are distributed as needed to the various service providers. We do recognize that there's not a great business case for every single community, and we may not have service providers interested in responding to RFPs for some areas, although we're going to try and make it large enough that it makes a good business sense for them to go there. But we may need to create some municipal projects to reach all dwellings. So that's also in our plan to include as needed. So a little bit about this, our request for proposal. In spring of 2021, we issued a request for information, which is a non-binding request to find out who's interested in partnering with us, and also explore various technical solutions. Technical solutions include fiber that's being buried in the ground, fiber that can be run along aerial pathways like telephone poles, electrical poles, also wireless, sort of like a 5G, or and we'll talk more about another wireless solution that's being experimented with in the county, and regular and then partnership interest. We had 30 service providers registered and download the RFI. 14 of them responded. So the 14 showed us there was a reasonable amount of interest in partnering with us. Certainly the main players participated in this. Unfortunately, no new creative ideas came out in those respondents. Most of them responded as if it was an RFP and were basically trying to pitch us on their solution. And their solutions all look very similar to what we've already developed as our broadband pathways and last mile connections. We will be issuing a request for proposal, which is a binding request that goes out. People submit actual proposals, which we evaluate with the intent of eventually contracting with service providers to assist partner in the construction. This is going to be issued in the late summer of this year, August, September timeframe for the 126 and the 118 pathways. Other efforts that are going on. So I've already mentioned Ventura County has developed, our office has developed and working with our consultant, 3 dig-ready pathways that include buried and aerial fiber. It's also interesting to know that you can run fiber in water lines. And so some of the fiber pathways we're looking at will be immersed fiber. As a side note, you cannot immerse fiber in waistlines. That probably seems obvious, but I had to ask the question just to make sure. And then there are other counties in Southern California. Southern California, so that would include LA, Riverside, Orange, San Diego, that are all kind of in the same boat we are, all ready to close the digital divide, all working on their planning. And as it has turned out, Ventura County is a lot further along than most other counties in terms of their planning. We have found in talking to other jurisdictions outside of California that they also are kind of in the planning phase. There's not a lot of counties that have, or jurisdictions that have a lot of dig-ready plans out there. And they all are looking at similar solutions, buried fiber, aerial fiber, or some wireless approach. Almost all of them are working with internet service providers to develop architectures, and almost all of them are counting on internet service providers to assist with the builds and also to provide the actual internet service. I thought I would mention that Nyland Acres, and most of you know where Nyland is. It's located where Santa Claus is off the 101 freeway. They came up with an innovative approach because when they went to distance learning, they felt they really need to get their grammar school children connected because their wireless service was so poor. So what they did is they purchased some high bandwidth wireless access points, big versions of what you would put in your home. They're able to reach further out. They interconnected them at key points in their neighborhood, which is roughly, by my estimate, about 500 residences. And we're able to connect them via a microwave link to a real school district's connection. So that's where they get their internet bandwidth from. It's working pretty well for them. They're looking at, I think the project is called Nyland Promise. Their project is will be increasing in terms of access points they're putting out there, but really what they need is a strong connection to the internet, stronger than the microwave connection, basically over the auto center into the El Rio area. And so they got pretty excited when we talked about how we would be bringing this fiber pathway or internet connection down the 118, which basically comes very close to Nyland and the El Rio areas, and that we would have redundancy. So if one link went down, we would have a backup link for them. They were actually talking to the new Amazon warehouse group to see if they could potentially redirect over there because they thought they would have more bandwidth, but that remains to be discovered, I think. So that completes my portion of the update on the county project. I'm now going to turn it over to Chrissy from the County Executive Office to discuss her portion. So Chrissy.
Thank you, Terry. Good evening, everybody. As Terry mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and give an update on, I'm just one of a number of staff that have been doing some research on the possibilities of what we can do to help bring fiber optic broadband to Somis, aside from all the great work that Terry and his team have been doing. Terry, can you please go to the next slide? So what we've really narrowed down is just two major options. One's a private option and one's a public option. The private option is that Somis property owners can engage in some type of a cost sharing agreement, obtain private financing, and completely self-manage the entire process and the project of installing fiber optic broadband in the community. Maybe it's more of a difficult option, given some constraints maybe with locating the financing, but it is an option. The secondary one, which seems to be more of the one that the county has been approached, is the public option. Next slide, thank you. So the public option, the most viable way to do that would be by establishing a community facilities district, a CFD, to finance the broadband infrastructure. Now, in total, the formation process can take roughly about 2 years from start to finish. That's not including time to do any type of construction RFP and actually doing the construction itself of installing the lines. With that, way the CFD works is once we form the CFD, we'll do a survey to form the CFD, and from there we would put out a proposition or a property tax measure that the parcels within the district itself would vote on. In order for that to successfully pass, the tax measure would have to have 2/3 vote, and then from there, all parcels within that district are assessed the tax. There's no opportunity to opt out. So everybody's all in if that tax successfully passes. And with that tax, that is for the cost of the construction of, the actual installation of the infrastructure, as well as ongoing maintenance costs. But that is completely outside of any monthly service charges for an internet service provider or any other fees that a service provider, whether it's Spectrum or whoever, would charge for the ongoing services to utilize the lines. Next slide. There is an opportunity to utilize, what we're kind of calling an opt-in method. So if part of geographic region were to opt in and create a CFD, if there was an interest to expand the CFD boundaries to incorporate other territories, it can be achieved down the road. There's no time constraints on when that can be done. It would require the annexation of new territory, and that in itself is very similar to setting up the district. And it's roughly, again, about a 2-year process. And it's basically kind of restarting everything. All new tax calculations would have to take place. There'd be a new survey and board hearings and other things of that nature. And then once the district is set and the tax passes and it's successful, from there the county would manage the entire process. So we would go out and find the financing, get the bonds in order to finance the construction. We would manage all contracting with engineering studies, the construction itself. We would facilitate all the tax assessment and the collections of the property taxes, and we would obviously continue the oversight of the utility itself. And so everything that we would do would be in accordance with the California Constitution, which also obviously includes public bidding requirements and things of that nature. Next slide, Terry. Thank you. Just a few things to note in pursuing the public option. The first two things are to consider for the public option. So one, it's not a instantaneous product. To set up the CFD, like I mentioned, it is roughly 2 years plus the timing of doing the construction RFP, the bidding process, and the actual construction itself. So that in itself will probably be an additional 2 years. As I mentioned, we can do an opt-in method, but with that, it does present some other unique challenges. Again, timing, it can take a little bit of time. There are costs associated with essentially resetting, redoing the tax methodology and assessment and doing another election and things of that nature, or the annexation process. It could also, depending on how the district is initially set up, or even after, depending on what would take place, if it is a reduced amount of participants, something to note is it does result in reduced security for any of the bonds that we have. So that's something that would have to take into consideration, that uniqueness of it. Also, if we were to only select a portion of a community, that could create some issues with having, some inequity in terms of the access itself, along with all the administrative efforts that would have to be utilized in order to create all of this. And then the last item just to consider is everything that Terry just mentioned of this, the county's broadband project, everything his team's working on, the fact that there is potential state or federal funding that could come and help fund some of this is really a real opportunity in itself. Next slide, Terry. Thank you. What we kind of view as next steps is really waiting to hear the results of what federal and state funding would come down the pipeline in the coming months or even early next year. Just because it's such a huge opportunity, and if it is really successful, it could be a lot of money that could go a long way to help in these efforts. And depending, how that plays out, from there, we would continue moving forward to conducting a survey for Somis to gauge the interest in moving forward with a fiber optic broadband. Obviously, there are some individuals have been very vocal and very passionate and really just doing a great job of trying to advocate for this. But part of what we're looking at is the community as a whole and who all could benefit from this and who would have the interest and the willingness to move forward with it and the ability to afford any additional property taxes to fund that type of item should any federal state funding not be available or not sufficient funds be available to help do something like this. And then from there, once we do the survey, we would obviously, compile a report and present the results to our Board of Supervisors so they can provide further direction on, moving forward. Next slide, Jay. I think that's all we have. So we open the floor to any questions you might have.
Okay. We're going to have the MAC ask questions first, and then if there are any questions from the community, we'll go there next. So,
Cindy, Jack Foss here. Under the public option, there seems to be maybe a cost benefit to the service providers. Normally, they pay for the infrastructure and provide the service and bill you. However, if we do that under what we're paying for, whether it's a tax base or whether it's a funding from the federal or state government, then they basically get a free ride on the infrastructure and simply provide the service. Does that mean that their service costs will be reduced by that amount?
I guess that's my question, Chrissy. So what we believe is going to happen is, yes, that there would be some benefit to the service providers of us assisting with the infrastructure. We're not necessarily saying that we're going to pay the government funding is going to pay the entire cost. That goes back to what the RFP, the request for proposal, does. We're looking for a partnership. And so what we are looking for is we're looking for people that are going to have some providers that are going to have some skin in the game, but we also want providers that recognize that the public is making an investment in your company and we're expecting something in return. And the Digital Divide Group is really strong on this point because the service providers haven't really stepped up to close the digital divide like we expected them to. And so if we're going to start handing out funding to them, then there needs to be consideration on their side that they are in fact going to close the digital divide, and the places where the business case doesn't work for them, they still need to go ahead and do it. And when they go to the disadvantaged neighborhoods, they need to provide reasonable costs for internet access. And I'm talking about basic access, not hooking up to free video streaming services and all that. If those are generally available for free, great, but the cost, the pay as you go services for the various extra things you can do, that's kind of on the people that are getting it. But just basic access, connectivity to the internet for searching and all the free things on the internet, that should all be handled by them at a reasonable cost.
Thank you.
Denise, I have a question.
Sure.
Pat Richards. Question for Terry. I understand that the rates are regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission. Is the county have the ability to regulate rates with regards to infrastructure service?
I think that's something we're going to work out. So I think the CPUC, the Public Utilities Commission, is getting into some new ground as they're being given some authority over this. And so, for example, there already are situations where there are rates for reduced rates for electrical or reduced rates for basic necessity utilities that you need. And so I think that somebody's going to have to look at that. It's certainly something that the groups I've been working for are looking at. The amount of that's going to happen, I think no one's willing to say exactly what's going to happen yet because we're waiting to see how the funding comes down and how the service providers engage with us on it.
Still leaves the question open as to who's going to regulate rates.
That is correct, because right now the internet rates are not regulated, and that's part of the challenge. So how is that going to happen? And I believe that the state money that would be provided to if the state money is provided to the CPUC for management oversight, which is something that I've heard, I would imagine there would be some rate setting going on, but then you have money coming in from the federal side. And how would that play into it? I'm not aware of anybody that has the answers to that yet.
Okay, I have a question for Christy. Under public options, there's a reference to utility oversight. What does that mean?
Mostly, it would be subject to the county to contract and find eligible service providers to essentially tap into our lines to provide the services to the community. So we would be tasked with, performing that function of finding an appropriate partner and having them. But that said, it wouldn't be true governance. I don't want to get mixed into. We would be able to fully regulate, the entire, like as Terry mentioned, the rates. We wouldn't be able to regulate all necessarily the service rates for the monthly charges and things of that nature.
Christy, could you give me an example of how that would work?
Christy, I can perhaps add a little bit to that. I think in terms of the utility oversight in this particular example with the CFD, rates are regulated by the CPUC, but it does depend on the type of entity that is registered. For example, telecommunications companies have a different type of licensing with the CPUC than, say, a cable company does that provides provides internet service, or simply an internet service provider that's providing internet service over an existing set of infrastructure. So in this particular example where essentially the community facilities district, which would be all of the homeowners in the Somis community that opted into this program, would be paying as part of a special assessment on your property taxes for the infrastructure. In terms of the internet service, there would be we anticipate or envision a contract that would be let for that internet service. And I think it would be reasonable in that contract to bid, one, we would be required to bid that out competitively, and two, to put some hoped for or anticipated requirements in terms of a potential rate structure, because this would just be looking at the internet service component of the provisioning and not the infrastructure, and not necessarily as a telecommunications provider licensed under the CPUC. So there are some factors involved there, but that could be an example of the utility oversight that we're talking about.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions?
Are there any questions from the MAC? Because if not, I'll turn it over to you. I have a question from the community. Gunnar, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
I can.
My headset on. Good evening, everybody. My name is Gunnar Holme. Those of you that know me, there's no introduction, but I'm a resident of Donlan Road in Somis. I started this project. I can see Mike eyeballing me from here. I started this project about 4 years ago, and I'm trying to get better quality of internet for our area. And I noticed there are a lot of roadblocks, both from legislative and from the service provider themselves. So I think we're at the stage where I decide whether we go with, for example, the spectrums of the world or the frontiers of the world, or we go a different direction entirely. And when I looked to see what options were out there for Somis, because we do have a small community, our problem, just to kind of just bird's eye view this, is we don't have enough people. We have a very small group of people. And because of that, big people like Spectrum, even though my house is in their area, they can choose not to serve me. And there's nothing under the law of the land, under CPUC, that can force them. So even with our new setup, they can't actually state anything, because they'll simply point back to the CPUC rules and say, well, we have service in the area, it is available for them, but they have to pay a fee to connect. And my fee, for example, to connect to Spectrum is 20,000. My neighbor's fee, 50,000. So there's all these other little gotchas in there with using one of the large providers. And as well, the large providers have tremendous clout. They're a huge company. They're probably more money than the county put together. So again, you can't underestimate who you're dealing with. So with that in mind, I decided to set up internet for the northern part of Somis, not the southern part. Now, the reason the northern part is important is because that has frontier and very bad internet or no internet, whereas the southern is mostly, that's south of the 118, by the way, the northern southern, has mostly Spectrum in that area, and they have fairly good internet. There's a tiny little portion of La Cumbria on the north that has Spectrum, but that's the area. So it took me about 2 years to find a provider that could give me a cost that our community could afford. And let me explain how this works. So where the county might want me to provide 100% of Somis, all areas and everybody service, well, here's the problem. First of all, a chunk of that is under Spectrum, so those people won't sign up. Second of all, a chunk of that may be in a very far distant area. To run fiber, all of that might be really, really expensive. And as Mike Pettit said, and Terry said, you might need state funding, because it just needs, what, minus 30,000 a mile. So, and I know the county cost is more expensive. So we chose to kind of run a pilot in the northern part area, the northern area, cover that area first, and then possibly with expansion or subsequent annexation, include other bits into it as we go along. And I believe that was the question that was put to the supervisors in the past, that we see is a pilot feasible for, it is Somis, but it's the northern area of Somis, and it's a specifically delineated area. And there's another thing I wanted to do, and this was something that caught my house. When I checked, was my internet serviceable under Spectrum? Right now, you can look up my address. It says it's serviced. But when you come out here, it's 9 poles away. So there's a little bit of that going on. Olivia Mosey on Blackberry Lane, to name somebody, and she's right in the middle of a Spectrum area. They don't serve her, and they won't run a line up to her house. They want a lot of money. So again, when you're signing with the, Pat, remember what you were saying, is there any thing to force them. There's nothing, and they have more money and more lawyers and more time than you, and they're not interested in. They'll just sign the broad contract, and that's it. Whether people get service or what level of service, that's a different thing. I began to look to the more Midwest models. I'm kind of at the midpoint of my spiel. Hopefully, I won't glaze everybody over. And so what they did is they decided to invest in themselves, break up the ownership and refunds back into the community, and fund their own infrastructure because the big players simply weren't interested. I know, Mike and Terry, we have to fit into a greater plan. And that is the idea, a fiber link between the schools, redundant connections from 2 points. That is absolutely important. But you have to remember, your plan is fantastic. And I'm a system administrator. I see exactly where it's going, but it's like 5 years away. And I've already waited 5 years. My 2-year-old is now a 7-year-old. My 7-year-old will be like a 12-year-old. My math is right. So it's taking a very long time to get this even moving. And I know only through Linda Park's support. Linda, thank you. You did tell me this would take a long time, and I only begin to see your words are very, very true. But we would like to get something moving and something like going off in that direction. We have a possibility or a chance of raising funds for our, I'll call it the northern area of Somis, and then see if that feasibility study and subsequent signups get sufficient people to make the overall project work. I'm going to go into some fast numbers and I'll end with a couple of quick statements. Our fiber, I think, in the ground connected is about $30,000 a mile. I think it adds up to like 1.5 million for a 30 to 40 mile project. The county's figures, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, at the cheapest end for the same 30 to 40 mile, and that's the RFPs that go out, is between 10 million and 20 million, depending on the vendor. So I know whatever's out there, we can beat them hands down at like 15% of their cost. And when I ran those figures, and that was like 4 years ago, they have raised slightly because of COVID and other things like that, but they're still pretty bang on the measure. And even I believe someone said my project is a very small project in itself. And I do have the vendors still on board, but I'm trying to keep them, to honor their agreement is getting harder and harder all the time. So there's another thing I take issue with. Chrissy, and it's not you, it's just the way it's worded. Chrissy, you said all parcels have to be included. That is incorrect. You can check aboard that. I checked with that. You can have someone that signs up like a water district, and that is available. And I spent 4 years talking to the tax consultant. I don't think he told me lies for 4 years straight. Now, we can bring the tax consultant in and I'll ask him the question again and he'll give me the answer. So if someone does not want to sign up, remember, we have people in an area that have the parcel that has no house. They're not going to pay into an internet with just a vacant lot of land. But your particular model would force them to sign into that. And that's one thing that I noticed a lot of the residents were very happy in doing is signing in when they want it. Now, we still got plenty of people to sign in, but you can't force everybody because you'll end up just getting up people's nerves or aggravating them by forcing them to pay for a service they can't even use. And in Somis, there's plenty of lots that have vacant land that is not being used at all, and they don't want internet there. So that is that particular issue with that particular segment. Again, I really want this to work. Mike, Terry, I understand you've put a tremendous amount of work into this to get it this far, and we all want better internet for everybody. It raises the value of homes. My kids don't sometimes have to go to another house when they want to get connected for school in the morning. The internet, like from my house, is 784 kilobyte upload and about 5 meg download. Now, most people won't know what that is, but I know too you do. And the internet for Kirby is like 0 and 0, I think. You can hear his phone stutter out every now and then. His wired internet's terrible. So again, I don't want to belabor the point. I'm still very much for our Somis project. I believe working with the county, I know you have federal timelines that can't be crunched, but I believe there's plenty of opportunity to provide you material, provide you what you need to bring the timelines down a little bit to make it work. And I'll leave it at that because I think I overran my time by like 10 minutes. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Gunnar. Chrissy?
Can I just, I just want to clarify one thing. Gunnar, you said it was incorrect that all parcels within the district would have to participate. That was incorrect. That is correct. Once the district is established, all parcels, should the measure pass, would have to participate. That said, I think what you're thinking of is for the district can be made up of whatever properties or area collectively the community decides it wants it to be. That is where you don't have to do, you have a lot more flexibility. But once that district is established, once that tax passes, everybody has to participate. There is no ability to opt out once you're in the district, whatever that district may look like.
I agree, Chrissy. Sorry, it's the way it reads. I don't know if it can be amended somehow, is that everybody's forced in, but you're right. If you do opt in at the start, you can't opt out later. You're in forever.
Yeah,
Well, what it means is you
correct. Yeah, the parcels within the district, that's where there's no opportunity to opt out
Yeah.
within the district. But yeah, we can make up, there is a flexibility to make up the district whatever we'd like it to look like.
I found I got a huge amount of people wanting to opt in, but very few people that when they realized they weren't going to be forced, they were much friendlier to the overall plan. And I just don't want to force anybody because again, it's like a tax you have to pay versus a tax you might pay. A lot of people will opt into the might pay tax versus the have to pay tax. You just end up annoying everybody. So again, my apologies. It reads a bit unusual to me. I just want to make sure that people know they can, when it's at its inception, you can opt in or out. But after that stage, you're in or out. And unless later on it becomes an annexation issue. Thank you.
Also, if I just want to share a little bit of additional information. And first of all, I would like to just recognize all of Gunner's efforts. I know he's been pursuing this for quite a while, and just he's done a tremendous amount of work, and so very much appreciate the legwork that he's done over the years, and his passion for trying to bring much needed internet service to this community. And so I think just a couple points of clarification to Gunner's point about the cost differences, and just want this group to know, whenever the county does put in infrastructure like this with the taxpayer dollars, we are required, because it's a public entity doing this, we have certain bidding processes that we have to do. We have to do a transparent and public bid on the projects. So we couldn't just award necessarily a contract for building internet infrastructure, putting in fiber, et cetera, just go out and pick a person that is going to do it and do it. So we do have some of those obligations that we would necessarily by law and regulation have to correspond and follow. And so that will likely present a different set of costs. There may be some prevailing wage requirements and things like that as part of that contracting that could possibly not be required if you were to just go and get together as a community and decide that you wanted to do this on your own and agree to putting some tax liens on all your houses and pull some, get a funder to loan you the money on, some kind of secured mechanism and do this project on your own. So those are probably the different approaches, but I just wanted to make sure that we're forthright and open with what some of those differences are with the community here in pursuing this type of an option.
Mike, I have a question for you, Jack Foss here. The question is that you can in fact split an RFP. For instance, if you find that it's cost effective to do so. So if there is an area vis-a-vis the one that Gunner is talking about that could be done for significantly less than what another part of the RFP could do, you could probably split that out from the RFP and do it separately. Is that correct or not?
Well, certainly the scope of the contracts can be identified in terms of what they are. I think in terms of the work to be done, the work up front that would take, that Chrissy presented in her presentation is the work to identify this patchwork of who's gonna opt in to the community facilities district and to determine what the tolerance for monthly service is and and the infrastructure cost as well for the individuals that would be participating. So because remember, this would be a tax obligation on the parcel until the infrastructure cost is paid back.
Thank you.
A point, can anybody hear me?
Yes.
So a point to Mike Foss and both to Mike. Mike, I appreciate it. Thank you for clarifying that. It came to my knowledge that when drawing the lines and mapping the fiber, let's say I had two pieces of land that were far apart. I needed to run down, for example, Balcom Canyon or something like that. Some of the neighbors were willing to let me run fiber privately, not at contractor cost, but at a very inexpensive rate. I'm sure, you know, basically almost like free running the line. It's still buried. It's just not run under the contractor costs. And if you add and for example, I have some neighbors with like a half a mile long driveway. The contractor's not going to run a half a mile, which will cost, like in my estimate, over 15K on my figures, when the neighbor's gardener can run it in just standard water pipe for, I don't know, $200. So there were a lot of those cost savings and improvements. I know it sounds a little bit funny, but it was like when you look at 15K versus like a couple $100, it was worth look at some of those efficiencies that could be brought into the bigger picture. And I understand what he's saying about kind of splitting the RFP. We were able to bring in cost improvements, and I hope the county would be able to avail of them to make it more affordable, because what it does is it brings down the overall cost for everybody. When you start bringing the small improvements, it just meant that the contractors specifically contracted on specific areas. And on other areas, for example, I had a line going over to Satakoy, over to, I think, the Skywalker Driver areas up behind the golf course. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area, but they were cutting through two farmers' properties. And I kind of said, you know, if we could make an agreement, I don't have to go through the frontage on the 118, which is a very long route to get to that area. I can actually cut straight through their fields and run that line a lot cheaper than I would have to run normally. So again, there's, I hope Mike or Jack, sorry, I hope it kind of answers some of the question. There is ability to work with the community to install fiber in the ground. You still have to pay for the fiber roll, but to install it for nearly free. But in other areas, like on the roads have to be cut and sealed afterwards. We have to pay full contractor cost for that. And Mike, my particular bid is a it's a union bid. What do you call it? The prevailing wage bid. It's a full union bid. I think it's about $300,000 cheaper if I do it privately, but I have to pay prevailing wage according to Linda Parks. So, and sorry, that's my point.
Okay. Denise, do we have other questions?
I don't see any hands.
I have a question.
Oh.
So it seems like there's two things going on right now. One is this not most expeditious effort to try to do something specific to Somis. You know, we've got to go through the process and the survey and all of that. Same time, we've also got the potential for getting some funds to do something countywide. And I'm wondering how they interplay with each other. Is there something with the countywide one that can help us to move with Somis as part of that? And, you know, should we start, you know, continue going at the same speed that we're going with Somis, or can we, you know, make get some benefits out of the larger scale? Anyone?
Well, certainly if the funding from the state and the feds come in that Terry alluded to, and if it's, you know, 600 million for our region, that funding would possibly offset the need for a CFD completely, because then the infrastructure would not have to be paid for by the property owners as part of a special assessment on their tax. But you know, I do want to you know, manage expectations. The time frame on that wouldn't be in a year. You know, that if you imagine all the different projects throughout the county to close the digital divide, there would be a tremendous amount of work there. But the good news is this group has already done a tremendous amount of work. So it's possible. I can tell you there would likely be more of a focus initially on disadvantaged communities and communities that had no broadband internet access. So certainly the area we're talking about has no broadband. And Gunner's point on the companies advertising that they have it but they don't is absolutely spot on. And that's just really from a competitive perspective. They present themselves as covering an area to avoid any other competition from coming in the area. But that would be a possibility. So that would be, in my mind, is a question if we proceed down the route of the CFD with you know, a special assessment on property taxes, and then this money comes through from the federal and state governments, then you know, we would have to look at what could any of that money be applied to offset the infrastructure paid for by the facilities district or things like that?
Is there, you say like the priority is going to be at disadvantaged communities, for example? Could it possibly be that it would also be communities that are shovel ready, which Somis may be if they have, plans in place and such? Would that provide any benefit? And but it sounds like overall what you're saying is the funding that we might get from the states and feds will be won't be here for a while. So you think we should do both efforts at the same time?
Well, Terry can jump in here. I think we anticipate hearing something by the close of the state budget here in September.
Yes, that would be correct. We're and I think most people can follow this along in the news. So our approach is, let's get the federal money and let's use the federal. Our approach was, let's get the federal money and let's use that to leverage the state. Since then, the state has started on down their own path with their own broadband funding. So at this point, whichever one gets money first that makes it available to us, that's the path we go. And both of them are in at least tens of millions, if not more, on both sides, which is more than enough for us to get some of these projects off the ground.
Mike, just one quick thing. There was a third option, and I wasn't sure if the providers would do it. Would it be possible that the county, let's say, for example, you start our project, you apply for the state and federal funds, you get the state and federal funds, our project's up, you continue building around the county, then you amalgamate our project into the county project, and I'm stretching out on a limb here, so bear with me. But then you put multiple ISPs competing against each other on that. Like I only want to give it to one company if they give me such a good deal. That's what Pat was saying, with the pricing. If they give us such a good deal, it would be foolish to give it to anybody else. But if I can't get a good deal of everybody, I'm not giving it to Spectrum. I'm going to have like 10 providers on the line, and they can all happily kill each other, quote unquote. But again, because then that's what encourages competition. And there is a place called Ammon. It's AMMON. If you look it up, that's where I think they have like 4 providers competing against each other. And it's as simple as like changing your hotel booking. You go downstairs to your main TV and you click on a different provider and you're done. You've moved to a different vendor. So would it be possible to, what you're saying is to amalgamate the Somis project into the bigger project, or are they forever distinct?
Well, the answer to that is possibly, and the reason why I say that is all the rulemaking associated with the funding has not been done yet. So certainly if the rulemaking associated with the funding allowed that, absolutely. If it doesn't, then but to your point on the competition, I think that's exactly the plan. And Terry alluded to that in his presentation, that the goal, and depending on the approach, right? It might be, hey, we're putting out a proposal to close the digital divide in this area. We want individuals to, companies to solicit and provide responses to do that. Then there's the question of who owns that infrastructure. And one approach, like companies that own infrastructure, like Crown Castle and some others, they just own fiber backbone all over the place. Well, they lease fiber to any provider that wants to provide service on that fiber. So that's one approach where then you could have competing internet service providers, competing for the lowest cost to provide the actual service to the residents. And the nice thing about that is exactly what you're talking about, Gunnar, where then they're looking to see who can acquire the most business. They don't have the infrastructure cost associated with that fiber, but they're able to then compete on the service side to lower the cost to the consumer.
Thank you.
Okay. Denise, do we have any other questions?
I don't. Let me just really quickly check the chat. I don't have any hands raised. So I also put my email address in the chat if anyone wanted to email a question. So I don't have any emails either. So.
Okay, well, then let's proceed with the agenda item. Next item on the agenda is.
Okay.
Yes. Got somebody?
No. I was just going to say thank you to Terry and Mike and Chrissy for coming. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the
Thank you.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, council comments on anything that's not on the agenda. Anybody have any comments?
I do. Oh, Bob, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jack?
Yes,
Oh, did you say you had a comment?
I do have a comment,
Okay.
but I think I saw Bob with his raised hand. I'll go ahead with my comment since he's on mute. It received some comments from some community folks over here in the La Cumbre area that concerned about Airbnbs in Ventura County and the impact on the folks in the neighborhood. Wondering if we can put that on the agenda later to possibly find out what the rules and regulations are for Airbnb in the county area.
I noted that.
Okay.
My turn?
I think Bob had it.
Yes.
Just an informational item. They're doing some closure or one laning of the bridge coming into Somis from 118. If anybody want to know what they're doing, supposedly Caltrans is taking soil samples of compaction and other things right there. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm trying to write some of that stuff down. So, all right, we completed agenda item number 8. Number 9, public comments, which I think we've received quite a few already.
Any
Not-
not on the
Not on the
agenda?
agenda.
Oh, I'm just looking to see if I have any hands raised on anything not on the agenda. I don't see any. I'll check the chat room. I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay, very good. Move on to item 10. And what I have on future agenda items is the redistricting committee possible letter that the council may want to generate a question regarding the county's interest in Airbnbs and the Somis Bridge Caltrans question. Anything else?
The Somis Bridge Caltrans?
Yeah.
Well, that was an agenda item. That was just a fact.
Oh, okay. Can we get a report back, Denise, from Caltrans as to what they're planning on doing?
Yeah. Bob, you want to send me the information where you got that information and I can see.
It's the big orange signs that are blinking on and off on both sides of the bridge.
Oh, then I'll check in with Caltrans and see if they have an update for you. Just what's going on.
Yeah, that was an informational item. It wasn't an agenda item.
Okay.
All right. Anything
Because
else?
we know everybody's curious.
Sure. Okay. And then did you want to do something with regarding the Airbnbs?
I think
It's
Jack,
with a report on what is the rules in the unincorporated area. So at least you have that information and then you can decide from there. So we'll just give you some background to get you going. Well, I've got the floor. I just want to get back to you also that the farm worker housing project will require a deed restriction that it only be for farm worker households. So that's how they're looking at handling that with a deed restriction. And I also see Dave here, and we all attended the wonderful Somis groundbreaking for your well treatment. That was a fun morning. So I forgot to mention that in my comments.
hey,
Right.
any other comments? All right. Linda, I really appreciate your attending our meetings. It's very helpful for you to explain what's happening countywide. I think that's very informative. So on my behalf, I'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last item on the agenda is adjournment. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Bob does.
It does. Do Do I have a second?
A second.
All
Okay.
right.
Pat Richards,
Aye.
Bob Fogerson,
Aye.
Jack Foss,
Aye.
and Patty Martinez.
Aye.
All right, 7:22 p.m.
All right.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you
Bye.
very much, everybody.